welcome to the January 30th, 2023 special meeting of the Eugene City Council and the Urban Renewal Agency. Thank you for joining us in this hybrid meeting format. For work sessions like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials web page. Thank you again for joining us. And with that, I call this meeting to order of the Eugene City Council and the Urban Renewal Agency. And I will turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Happy to be here tonight, and also wanted to introduce Frank Lawson, General Manager of eWeb, who I know you're hanging out on the wall, but wanted to just acknowledge that you've been here because we've been working pretty closely over the last several years on numerous topics that cross over between eWeb and the city, and he's been such a great partner, so I appreciate him being here tonight. We also have a number of staff from facilities, the manager's office, public works, finance, so we have a good team here to support your discussion. The materials in your AIS tonight really included, I'll just walk through a high-level summary of more of our, I think, recent history, an outline of the terms that I plan to go through that included a map of all the properties, and then a decision matrix, action matrix that has really covered the history of City Hall from about 2000 to 2016. And I'm actually going to pick up a little bit here, just a little bit on 2016. What's really interesting is I went back into a lot of our history and found that some of the earliest discussions about City Hall and what the community thought date back to 1909. So it's pretty rich history of where we've been. But since 2016, I think that date stands really key to me in my career, because 2016 is really when we had gone through the process of removing the existing City Hall at 777 Pearl Street. We had done a bunch of site development. We had done conceptual drawing, design drawing. We had bid documents, and we had actually gone out to bid. And at that meeting in July of 2016, when we were out to bid, council made a decision to wait a couple of days until after a conversation with the county, where the county had an idea about potential different use of land. And potentially, since we were building a small footprint, would we consider building on the butterfly lot so that they would have more space for a larger county courthouse. Lots of reasons why that made sense at the time. A lot of sense for the county courthouse in particular. But that's sort of where we left off, got into a deep conversation about coordinated development. We looked at 4 different scenarios of sharing a city block, of swapping blocks, of looking at eWeb. Did a lot of work on that ultimately led to where we landed. And where we landed was really an idea to really phase that work. So we swapped the land. We started off right off the gate doing a bunch of work, public work around the town square, and focused on reestablishment of that 4th Park block and the Farmers Market Pavilion. The county has done a lot of work on planning for the courthouse and are using that existing site for temporary parking. We were, as I've shared this before, I think in potentially an executive session, but those projects of the Farmers Market, 4th Park block, and City Hall were kind of aligned and traveling together. And when we got to the early parts of 2020, we were talking to you about rough range of cost and also getting ready to enter into more of a schematic design phase. And so the last conversation you were making decisions around what to include and what not to include. So the idea of not doing underground parking, not creating more shelved space, what life safety standard you wanted in the building. You kind of come to that, and we proceeded after that with our architecture firm, general contractor, owner's rep, I guess is what you would call it, Jeff. And we're starting to get some ideas of numbers, and pretty expensive project. When we hit COVID and pandemic, and I was new in the role, and said we just need to pause and really focus our attention on the community and not be out there trying to generate new revenue for a city hall that we didn't have during a time when businesses were closing down and people were asking for our support. So that's really where we were. And as we came out last year, sort of transitioning back to regular business, we started to think about what's going to come next. And I started to talk to you about, okay, now what? Are we going to proceed forward with building a new city hall? Are we going to try to stay in this space? Are there other alternatives? And started to look at a handful of alternatives In the middle of that was when eWeb kind of had gone out for an RFP for the headquarters site, didn't choose a final proposal out of that, and news was kind of that the general manager had been given discretion to dispose of the site and sell the site. And at that time, I contacted Frank and said, is this actually still on the market? Is that a possibility? And we put it in the mix of things to explore for a number of good reasons. And as we've explored all of them, it actually makes a whole lot of sense for a future city hall. I could talk on any one of these trajectories. Part of it is really related to the cost of what we can achieve. When we first started talking about the potential for eWeb back in 2016, the cost of the actual purchase and also the potential renovations was much more significant than what we have talked about in the recent months and what we achieve for that. So instead of achieving a footprint that really accommodates the city manager's office, some of central services, actually, I don't even think it accommodated the full city attorney's office. We actually have space where we can consolidate more and achieve a couple of things that are really important. For example, one of the ones I've talked about is sort of promise to the Library Foundation and the library supporters that fundraise for that fourth floor to be eventual library space, that we would actually be able to create an opportunity where they could achieve that because we would have space to consolidate people. And then there's a number of things about the website that are not necessarily related to City Hall, but actually provide a lot of opportunities. So one that I've talked about is being sure that we can keep the fountain open to the public for a long time. I know that's kind of a small amenity, but I think it really matters to people, and the fact that all the machinery and operations are in the building and there's no easy way. We just can't guarantee that it's gonna stay open and public. The adjoining acreage of 4+ acres of land that gives us a lot of flexibility around how might you accommodate more housing? Is there a possibility of co-locating a fire station? Parking for the park, which everybody has been talking about. It meets a lot of needs that we've all been talking about. So in addition to sort of the City Hall problem, we also have other things that we can address. And it essentially completes the city's investment. We've invested, or the Urban Renewal Agency and city have invested close to, by the time we get to the completion of the plaza, I think close to $50 million, trying to make sure that we have a really strong connection across the whole downtown to the river, and that we have a place where people can celebrate, have civic engagement. And this is kind of that last piece. It makes a lot of sense. Preserves that public space for the foreseeable future, probably my entire lifetime, I would imagine, though, as you go back to 1909, you realize that different councils make different decisions and communities make different decisions, and you can't really be sure of that. So the deal points that were included in your packet, I think we called it the outline of terms, gets to the more specifics. So for that headquarters building and the 4.4 acres, what we've talked about is a $12 million purchase price for that, with $8 million of that being cash due at closing, and the rest would be a $4 million payment we make within 5 years. We've talked about it as being essentially a balloon payment. What that allows us to do is gives us the flexibility to be able to purchase the building and actually make the first round of investments we think that need to happen in order to create the council chambers, do some of the basic things to really do a first phase move in. We've had our staff go through that. Somewhere in the $4 to $5 million is probably the right number for that. This gives us that flexibility without having us dip into reserves or any other sort of accounts that we didn't anticipate. This is money we've been holding for City Hall for many, many years. And as you know, that money is sort of dwindled over time. And this would be an opportunity to actually make that payment and have that be completed. Most of the other big piece I think that is super important is the due diligence period. So we've negotiated a 4-month due diligence period. I think that's going to matter a lot in terms of making sure that the systems that we've evaluated, the assumptions that we've built into this are true, that there's nothing else about the site that will surprise us, and also gives us some time to do some transition planning and thinking about how we would approach that. just looking back on this. So, because not all of these, I mean, are super critical for discussion. Closing date, we're looking at the potential of July 1st. So trying to get through this quickly for both of us. That should we choose not to use this in the first 5 years, so during that sort of balloon payment time, should we choose not, the city choose not to use this at a city hall site or keep this for city services, that eWeb would have the first right of refusal to purchase that back, and that we would partner together on approximately 1,000 square foot customer service center, so people would still know they can come to that location to pay their eWeb bills, work with customer service people, and I think it actually creates a really interesting opportunity and possibility for the future of how we work together between our two organizations. There's quite a bit of furniture, used things in there, networking equipment that is all available for us to use at no cost, should we find that to be the most cost-effective thing to do. And I think we're all looking for the most cost-effective way to do this. And that's kind of the big pieces. So what would happen if you say yes to this agreement is that we will start off into our due diligence period. We'll start working on transition planning, and I'll just say, you know, to me, the first phase seems a little bit clear, right? That being able to accommodate the 4th floor of the library and the services that are in this building as our lease is up at the end of this year. Those are the things that make sense sort of as that first phase piece. And then I think there's a little bit deeper discussion that needs to happen about what's next, because one, you could see a couple of different avenues. Some people could say, well, you should just move all city services out of lease space, which may not be the most customer friendly face forward activities you would want in that second phase. So I think we just need to talk about, how does this fit into the overall discussion about downtown? How do we continue to keep a really vibrant core? What is our investment in ensuring that any places that we're leaving are also places that are getting some attention, especially in light of the discussion we had about downtown last week and some of what we're hearing from the community. And what I'll say about downtown, and then I'll turn it over to you for discussion, is I was looking at a map of all of the different places we have staff in the downtown. And while we will be able to consolidate and have the ability to do that, we still have a number of people that are going to be working in the core of downtown, to include Fire Station 1, Municipal Court, which is sort of on the edge. We'll continue to have city staff in the library. We'll continue to have city staff in this building because we have a downtown police station here. We'll continue to have staff, you know, the police auditor's office is on Broadway. So there's just a number of places. We'll continue to have staff working in the Holt Center. We have maintenance crews that are in the parkade. So I think, you know, this is not a giant exodus. It's just, it's an additional investment and ability to consolidate a lot and answer sort of a decades-long issue we've all been trying to solve. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you so much for that summary. It is daunting to read that matrix that you provided of how long this has gone on and how many permutations. So it's really sort of incredible to think we might actually resolve this City Hall question. So I have Alan and then Emily.
And Mike and I are the only ones that actually lived through all of that, including staff, most of the staff. Many may be asking why we didn't do this a long time ago. Well, back when we were looking at this, it was actually the most expensive of all the options that we had in front of us. And I'll just say for the record, if you'd followed Councilor Taylor and my advice, we'd be sitting in a city hall today at $18 million, but we didn't do that. I predicted at the time that waiting may make this too expensive to do. Fortunately, things changed and that didn't. And now I think the picture is different. I wanted to thank eWeb for negotiating this deal with the city. I think it's a win-win for both of us. What has changed and why now I'm glad to support this proposal is there are very significant things. Back then, it was more than twice as expensive as it is now, 27 versus 12 million. There's a new HVAC system in the building. With the creative financing that we have, we can afford to move and do it cost effectively. And I think the 100,000 square feet is great. There's parking that comes with it, because we were talking about potentially building a parking garage or lot, which always makes me shiver. The fire station is a possibility, is exciting. We can accommodate eWeb in their pay station. That's a great bonus because people have been paying bills there for 40 years almost. And the riverfront development is a complete game changer. That wasn't really in the picture when we were having this conversation before. So for all those things, I think this is a really good move for the city. And I support the city manager moving forward, and ask council to do that as well. You know, the downside for me was the perception that we're leaving downtown. But after I started thinking about it, two things occurred to me. One, I don't think we're leaving downtown as much as we're stretching it and doing that downtown to the river concept and making it more real. But also there's a bunch of opportunities that are afforded to us as this happens. One is that we can plan for this block right here, this 10th and Olive block. What's going to happen with this building, working with our partners at LCC? What's happening with the library? What's happening with the atrium building? How's that all going to work? What's going to happen with all of that stuff? We also can redevelop the park block where the city hall was planned to be. That could be a great development with retail over housing for downtown. I think would be really exciting. And the rest of the park blocks, that's a fantastic plan as well. We have to come up with the money for it. But it really, for me, all of that opportunity shows that it's exciting, but it also shows we're committed to and we care about downtown. So with all of that, I'm really excited about moving forward with this plan.
Great, thank you. Emily and then Randy.
Thank you, Mayor. This feels like it's a done deal. I know a lot of people will be happy and some people are sad and they feel abandoned and very nervous. It has certainly been a very long time coming. And I will put a plug for the impossible is that we should not have taken down the old city hall, even though some people didn't like it. It was iconic 1950s architecture. And I think it's a real loss. I realize that many things have changed, both with the eWeb building and the city. It seems rather amazing that it was so unaffordable, and now that it is. And I wonder on page ES1, my sample first, it said then, I couldn't resist. While it is possible for the city to move in and reuse the buildings with minimal renovation, which sounds like what we're going to do, it would require the city with less than optimal functional layouts. Aging building systems, I think, are taken care of. High energy costs, I guess, are better, and ongoing maintenance issues. But the less than optimal functional layout, has that changed? We get a lot of cubicles and furniture, which is great. They weren't there, and we took out a couple of non-essential walls. You have really big spaces for galleries or museums. So I'm wondering why it's okay now. And what changed with the seismic, why did we decide the seismic wasn't as important? It's like a miracle, it's financially possible. We can do it very quickly. We don't have any alternatives that work out. Seems really quick, but real estate often goes very quickly and you have to be ready for it. I love it that the fourth floor of the library could be accessible again. It's been something that's been important to me for a long time. Great, the extra lots. I worry about accessibility for bus riders. It's a beautiful building. I really like it, but I'm not sure that this would be my first choice. I know it wouldn't. I like the idea of it being open to the public more often than 5 days a week because, well, pandemic, nobody comes to the city hall, the faux city hall anyway. And I just wonder that the public would not really be using it. It would be the government. The loss of employees will affect downtown businesses, daytime safety and activity. And I hear there's new innovative plans for this transition to what seems like have to jump off the dock with not really knowing what we're getting into. Thank you.
Okay. I have Randy next, and then I have Mike, Matt, and Greg in the queue. and Jennifer.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you. I appreciate the work that's been done on this. Thank you, Frank and eWeb, for
He has a sunburn.
working with us and making this possible. If we're looking at this just from a standpoint of Eugene City and the city organization and the city hall, this makes great sense for a lot of reasons, financial and otherwise. I'm still very worried about our downtown core area. I'm worried about how we are going to continue our work to make downtown safe and accessible, and then how are we going to keep it that way? That's one of the big pieces. People aren't going to come down. They aren't going to stay downtown if they aren't safe and have the perception and feeling of safety. So, I mean, that's going to be incredibly important. I also believe our downtown is transitioning more towards a center for living and activity. With the pandemic, we have a lot more people working from home. I'm not sure that trend is going to reverse itself at this point. I think we're going to be living in a hybrid environment from at least the foreseeable future. But it does make sense, and I will be supporting this, but not without concern about downtown. As far as the old City Hall, I do want to make a few comments about that. And Alan, I was here the whole time. We had these discussions as well, working from a staff standpoint. And I remember we had an earthquake that we felt downtown. And I remember pulling up, I was a battalion chief at the time, pulling up to the old City Hall. And Mike Penwell was out there with his hard hat on. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he says, "Well, we're assessing it for earthquake damage. We're looking for cracks." And my question was, how do you tell the new cracks from the old cracks? Because that thing was falling down. I mean, gravity was winning. So anyhow, I do feel better about this, but a question I do have, my recollection, and I can't say it's 100% accurate, maybe Frank can answer this, was that the eWeb building had its dispatch center in there for a while, had its major 24/7 operation out of there. Wasn't it built to a higher seismic standard to begin with?
Well, I don't believe that it would.
Yeah, you'll need a mic. Thanks.
No, you are. That's why I made you do that.
Counselor, thank you for the question. I don't believe that the building was actually built to a higher seismic standard. It was built to standards for public buildings with those particular uses based on 1988 codes, which would have been the standard at the time. But I don't believe, because we had our operations center in there, that it was built to a separate standard because of that.
Okay, well, thank you, sir, for clarifying that piece. So anyway, back to, and again, I will be supporting this, but back to my point about we need tangible efforts in our downtown if we want downtown to recover. Quite frankly, I don't think the employees that we will be pulling to this building are going to make or break downtown from a customer financial standpoint, but we need to figure out how are we going to bring more people downtown to live and otherwise, and how are we going to ensure safety? And that's going to be critical for the success of what is the heart of our city. And I don't know if city manager, if you can address those concerns. You probably don't have any specifics right now,
Randy,
but that's, yes. I can't see a timer. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Thank
sorry. Yeah, you're over. So.
All right.
Thank you.
And I'm tracking some of these questions, so I don't know if you want me to answer them one at a time or if you want to wait till everybody has an opportunity and come back to that. So it's really your call, Mayor.
Well, I think if you answer those questions now, that it might change what other people need to ask.
Yeah, so there was a couple, Councilor Simple also asked about some of the changes and what was different optimal then and optimal now around staff and how you would configure it. I think a lot has changed since 2016 in terms of how we work. And remember that when that study was done, we were trying to get as fair a comparison as we could of what would it cost to build a new city hall and what would it cost to bring the eWeb up to the same standard essentially as a new city hall. So we were doing things in that scenario that we might not necessarily do without that. For example, we're in a non-optimal setting right now, and we did that to try to make it work. And so I think there's some things that are different about how we work that make sense. And the due diligence period around all of this is going to be important in terms of, you know, looking at the seismic, looking at the systems and all of that. The downtown safety piece is front and center for me before, you know, pretty much daily, but also prior to this conversation, you know, we're working on trying to close a pretty significant budget gap, and in doing that, also trying to make a bigger impact in a couple of key areas that we've identified as those urgent community needs. So as we start to roll out kind of what's coming together in that budget package, I think people are going to see a different kind of investment in the downtown and the downtown safety that will happen regardless of this decision. So this is not related, but trying to make a different approach, change it, shift to more of an incident command type focus that we did with the unhoused, and kind of coming back to a little bit of that focus with the issues we've been dealing around housing and homelessness as well. So there's some things built in that are kind of a fresh new approach that I feel really hopeful about. The team's really excited about. And those things are going to be coming forward, Councilor Groves, regardless of this. So if you combine that with this, and also a real, you know, focus on how do we transition and how do we make this actually a win for downtown, I think that this actually frees up some energy and opportunities. That's my opinion. And I've been working on this for a long time, that, you know, sometimes things just actually need to get into place so we can just focus on how we actually bring back housing and vibrancy to the downtown.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mike and then Matt.
Thank you, Mayor. The last couple of weeks have been kind of weird, kind of strange for me. I couldn't possibly tell you how many people have written me, have stopped me in events and meetings, or called me up to say, you know, things like, I can only imagine what you're going to say, or, you know, how come I haven't heard you saying anything yet? And I suppose I can say that even someone who talks as much as I do can recognize the point when he's spoken enough on something. There are a couple of things I still want to say, though. So I will say I'm going to support this motion, and I would like to say thank you to Frank and to the EWA board and to your staff for all the hard work with the city on this. And certainly I want to say thank you to our city manager and our staff for all the incredibly hard work to work together with eWeb and come up with a good plan and a good opportunity for everybody. But mostly I want to say thank you to my colleagues for your wisdom and for your willingness to look at this question in new ways. So I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Matt, and then Greg, and then Jennifer.
Thank you, Mayor. Frank, thank you for being here. City Manager, thank you for getting us to this point. And thanks to both eWeb and the City of Eugene staff for the detailed analysis. The price is right. The location is stellar. And the opportunities are endless. Councilor Clark and Councilor Groves and I were at a realtors event recently. What is that, the 25th floor of the Graduate? 12th floor. Feels like the 25th. I'm afraid of heights.
The old Coconut Joe.
Right, we can't go 25. Can't go 25 floors in Eugene. So we're on the 12th floor of the Graduate, and we look north to the Butte, to Skinner's Butte, and you look east, look to your right, and it's right there. Like I want to call it the eWeb building, but it'll be the last time I do, because I think that there's a real potential to rebrand. So I will call it the FCH, the Future City Hall, is right there. It's like you could reach out and grab it. And we're so interconnected, this downtown and downtown riverfront, as witnessed or as realized by our $18 million investment on the riverfront park area. I see, as I mentioned, endless opportunities, Earth Day celebrations, future resurrecting the Eugene celebration. future Olympic trials. I have questions about the oddly shaped tax lots. There are a few that are just west of Ferry Street. One in particular that just is is hanging out as an island. That's the 2600 piece, right off of Mill Street. Since it is a special property as defined by is a special property in a defined HUD opportunity zone, what housing opportunities, if any, city manager, do you see as we absorb these 4 acres in this oddly shaped tax lot, other than bringing the library staff or bringing the city staff out of the library 4th floor, and other than consolidating, but also keeping a footprint throughout the community? As we go north into that park area, I don't want to touch that, but what other opportunities do you see for housing or other special projects that could be commercial and residential in those other pieces that are part of this deal?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really important to take a moment to sort of master plan that. I know a lot of people have had ideas for all of these tax lots that probably General Manager Lawson knows about that I don't know about, because a lot of people have approached eWeb wanting to ask about certain pieces. So I think an opportunity to have our community development team that's been working really hard on the riverfront and on the housing implementation pipeline, our fire department, we're all going to need to sort of master plan this a bit before we proceed. But I think there's a lot of opportunity here for those kinds of projects.
Thanks. Well, in my final second, Mayor, if you couldn't tell, I'm pretty fired up about this project.
Great. All right, Greg, and then Jennifer.
Thank you, Mayor, and I want to thank and commend the city manager and our eWeb chief for working this deal out. I have just one brief comment. In the words of Jean-Luc Picard, make it happen, number one.
Make it so.
Make
Greg.
it so.
Make it so.
I love Greg because he would misquote that, and
That's
I would
good.
too.
That's right. All right, thank
Look,
you.
I'm 62. I'm getting old. I'm missing. Okay?
All right, Jennifer.
Thank you. I'm not sure how to follow that. So I really quick, I just wanted to thank staff and the city manager and eWeb for, just recognizing an opportunity to rethink a decision with new information and being in a new place and bringing it forward and saying, maybe we take a look at this again, because obviously here we are, right? I often have said that it's not really about the building, it's about the work that goes on in the building. And yet, if you can have a beautiful building next to the river that is very accessible by bike and walking, and we're going to have a parking lot, and we're going to work on the bus thing. It's not perfect, right? I have to figure out how to get there on the bus. I don't even know how yet, but I will be there, and the community will be there with us. I'm really excited about it, and I just want to thank you for taking a second look. Thank you.
Thank you. And Lindsay.
Yeah, I don't come into this with as much historical perspective as some of our counselors here, but yeah, I just want to quickly say what an incredible investment this is. When I see, the breakdown, it's a great price. It's a great cost for what we're actually getting. An asset that's owned by the city with a large chunk of land. I think we just have to. So I think the accessibility is great. Figuring out the bus it will be important, but for many people who are driving, it will be more accessible. It's accessible by the bike path. I can't wait to ride my bicycle to City Hall. Easier than navigating the downtown streets. So I know that there are concerns that have been shared tonight. I also have those concerns with downtown, and but I think the benefits just simply outweigh those concerns, and we are aware of them, and we will address them, and we will make sure that that the transition is smooth as it can be. So thank you for all your work. I think it's going to be great. Thanks.
Thank you. I think that's oh, you have one more comment, Alan? Go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment about the old City Hall and remind people that the impetus behind that move was actually the fact that the steam plant went away and the entire heating system for that building went away. And we had to face the choice of investing millions of dollars into that building. And when we started looking at it, we realized not only do I spend millions on the HVAC system, but the plumbing system, the electrical system, structurally, earthquake. I mean, the shear walls underneath would eliminate a lot of the parking. And so, and besides, it was a cinder block building with no insulation and single pane windows, but all of that made us not choose that building. I mean, I thought, you know, inside was nice, outside looked terrible, but because we're getting this at half price, because we get a new HVAC system, we get parking, fire station, eWeb pay station, and the riverfront development that's happening around it. I think it is a great opportunity. We do have to care about downtown, and we have to move to do things to make sure we shore up the safety and also the development down here. But we have some really cool opportunities to do that. So I'm excited.
Yeah, thank you. Before I go for it, Emily?
I think it's too bad that we couldn't hear about some of these new innovative ways we're going to save downtown after all the many years of not saving downtown before this came to the table. We're not exactly sure what we're going to do with it. I get it. It's expedient, it's affordable, it's beautiful. But just it's almost lip service. We're going to save downtown because we don't know anything the exec team's been figuring out. So I have to vote against this. But at the same time, that's difficult for me because I see all the advantages of where we're going to go. And when I finally get my office with a window and a door, maybe I'll feel differently.
You know, I want to address that just briefly, because what I would say is that I think the city has been working pretty consistently year over year, trying to come up with a different approach for downtown. Remember, we got a very creative about how we would build a downtown station and fund a downtown team. We've brought forward different ideas around how we might do programming. We brought forward different ideas around downtown ambassadors. And I think what I'm saying to you now is that we will continue to have to iterate our approach to that in my career and probably in the next career to address what's happening right now, which is a lot of work around behavior and mental health and cleanliness. And so what I'm talking about is an adaptation. How do we adapt to what's happening now and take a slightly different approach? And we've been trying to do that every year, but I feel excited about where we're heading right now, mostly because it's during a time of significant reductions and trying to figure out how to weather the storm, that some ideas are coming forward that I actually think, as hard as that will be, it's preparing us really nicely for the future. And you're right. I don't even have all of the numbers lined up completely yet to be able to say, yep, here's where we're heading. And ultimately you and the budget committee are going to have to also support that approach.
Thank you. Randy, I guess I have another counselor wanting to speak. Randy, are you preparing to put a motion on? I just want to speak to before you put the motion on the table.
Yes, I'm prepared to make a motion, Mayor, and you can let me key me in when it's time. But I just wanted to quickly say, in response to Councilor Semple, and I certainly understand where she's coming from, but to all of my colleagues, it's up to us to make sure this is not just lip service about making downtown safer. I mean, this is something we can do. We don't know that pathway there yet, but this is going to take resolve and fortitude, and our community deserves this. Thank you.
Thank you all. I think with that, I could add to this, but I'm just going to be repeating what other people have already said. So I will just let us move on to the business at hand. And Randy, I'll turn to you to put the first motion on the table.
Thank you, Mayor. The first motion is I move to authorize the city manager to execute a purchase and sale agreement for the acquisition of the eWeb headquarters building and property consistent with the terms outlined in attachment A, and to authorize the city manager to close on the property purchase once due diligence is complete and all conditions of closing are successful.
Second.
Satisfied.
Third. Yeah, Scrivener's there.
All right, all in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that passes. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I looked right. I apologize, Emily. I was screaming too fast. 7 and opposed 1. Thank you very much. And I apologize for that. And a second motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Second motion, I move to include recommendations for the area near Olive and 10th and the park blocks as part of the transition planning for city services, and to keep city council informed about the overall transition process.
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that time I got it right. Thank you. That passes unanimously. And I just want to add my thanks to Frank Lawson for being here, to the whole team for negotiating this, to all of you counselors, really, as Mike said, for just really opening it back up and being willing to reconsider. It's very exciting, very promising. And with that, I guess with that, we are adjourned.